President Trump's longtime personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, is going to jail. Cohen has just been sentenced in a New York City courtroom on multiple charges, including his role in paying hush money during the 2016 election to two women alleged to have had affairs with Trump. Payments prosecutors say were coordinated with and directed by Donald Trump himself. Let's go right to our Justice Department correspondent, Pete Williams, in our Washington newsroom. Pete?
Well, this is lower than the prosecutors in New York had recommended. The probation department in its pre-sentence report had recommended something just shy of 4 years. So the judge is on the low end of the sentencing guidelines here, 3 years in prison. Cohen himself spoke to the court today saying that he lost his way, that his blind loyalty to Trump led him to choose darkness over light. The prosecutors in New York had urged a tough sentence, what they called substantial prison time, saying that a lighter sentence would send the wrong message, that he admitted trying to influence the election, that he deserves a tough sentence to promote deterrence. But the prosecutors from Robert Mueller's office were kinder on him today in court. They said that he was very helpful to their investigation, not only the potential Russian connection, what they called the core of their work, but also another case that they couldn't say in court. The judge, though, said that Michael Cohen committed what the judge called a smorgasbord of criminal conduct, marked by deception, greed, and ambition with broad public consequences. The judge said he lost his moral compass and sought to profit from his association with Trump, and that as a lawyer, Michael Cohen should have known better. So our understanding here, Lester, is that he will serve this sentence concurrently with the special prosecutor crime of lying to Congress. So that means no additional time for that offense. 3 years in prison. He'll stay out of prison until a sentencing date. So the judge will set a date. The judge will set a date for reporting to prison. And of course, Cohen's lawyers can also try to appeal this conviction and ask that he stay out. But their appeal rights are very limited here because he did plead guilty. So I wouldn't expect, I mean, they could argue about procedure here, but I wouldn't expect an appeal. He'll stay out until he's given a date to show up to prison to begin to serve this sentence, Lister.
Now, we recognize he didn't have an official cooperation agreement, but to the extent that he was telling what he reportedly knew to the Mueller team, will that continue in this interim period before he reports to prison?
Yes, I think so. And, you know, there is a procedure in federal court where if cooperation continues after sentencing, the prosecutors can go back to the judge, even if somebody's already serving a sentence, and say that it should be reduced. So there is a procedure for that. I can't imagine the prosecutors in New York would go along with that. I don't think it's likely that Mueller's people would do that, but if he continues to talk to them, as he certainly has indicated that he will. I mean, one of the themes of Michael Cohen since he pleaded guilty to this second charge of lying to Congress is that he wants to turn his life around and do the right thing.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.